For 70 years now and several generations, the United States has played a critical role in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO. Despite being a haven for global security and a shield to deter Russian aggression, many argue the United States is the glue of the alliance, supplying nearly 3/4 of its funding. President Trump has fulfilled yet another campaign promise, enticing other NATO members to increase defense spending and develop plans to reach the 2% target by 2024. I'm Bailee Byers, and you're watching Episode 6 of Promises Made, Promises Kept. President Trump has made it clear from the moment he took office he wouldn't allow NATO allies to benefit from American protection if they weren't contributing their fair share. Although one of the goals of the alliance includes combating terrorism around the globe, many argue the reality is much more intertwined in deterring Russian aggression in the region and abroad. That being said, President Trump has made it clear he wouldn't be afraid to put his foot down in regard to funding, because the United States isn't necessarily the country needing protection.
We are funding and taking care disproportionately of the costs of many countries, many countries that are taking us for a ride. We have to do something with NATO.
I just want fairness for the United States. We're paying for far too much of NATO.
The United States alone accounts for the vast majority of NATO defense spending, and we really cannot rely on one nation to defend all.
Now, let's take a step back and unpack the context of the alliance and why it was established in the first place. NATO is a political and military alliance comprised of 29 nations around the world, most of which are European Union members, but the list also includes Turkey and Canada. The bloc was first established back in 1949 amid the Cold War for the purpose of deterring Russian aggression in its neighboring regions and abroad. Overall, the alliance was constructed to promote both freedom and security by means of political union and military tactics. Democratic values make up the core of the bloc, though the alliance has gradually evolved into being a key player in defeating terror within the international arena. There are 14 articles which dictate the activities of the alliance, with Article 5 saying an attack on one nation is considered an attack on all and should garner the collective defense of all nations within the bloc. Though the alliance is symbolic in terms of global peace, security, and the spread of democracy, President Trump has made it clear that although he supports the alliance, he expects member nations to contribute their fair share.
I have been very direct with Secretary Stoltenberg and members of the alliance in saying that NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations.
According to the bloc's requirements, the 29 member nations are required to pay at least 2% of their GDP in defense spending contributions. Let's take a look at what exactly that funding is used for and why it's so important countries reach that target. NATO funding is critical in order to appropriate money to each of the three principal budgets. This includes the civil budget, which refers to the cost of running headquarters in Brussels, the military budget, and the NATO Security Investment Program. Without adequate funding, NATO would be unable to operate or offer adequate defense when member countries are in need. In the past, contributions have been used to fund things like sending troops to aid the US in the 17-year Afghan war, and the Baltic states and Poland to deter Russia back in 2016. Though in recent years deterring Russian aggression has been at the forefront of the bloc's goals, the alliance has also shifted gears to focus on combating international terror. That being said, President Trump has reiterated it is critical members pay the bloc the 2% requirement, since the U.S. continues to bear the burden of nearly 75% of the cost.
The 28 countries of NATO, many of them aren't paying their fair share. Number two, and that bothers me because we should be, as we're defending them, and they should at least be paying us what they're supposed to be paying by treaty, and contract.
Although only 6 countries, not including the United States, met the 2% funding threshold required by the treaty in 2018, nearly all of the nations have heightened defense spending since President Trump took office. Some reports suggest President Trump had made it clear he would consider leaving the bloc if the other members did not step up to the plate. And according to official NATO data, it looks like that rumored threat has worked. Nearly all nations within the alliance have increased how much funding they allocate to the alliance since the president rewrote the precedent abroad. 27 of the 29 nations have increased defense spending between 2016 and 2018. Many argue past Democratic leadership had swayed the trajectory of what was expected from allies, which led many countries to take advantage of American generosity. President Trump was ultimately able to persuade nations currently not meeting the 2% threshold to develop strategic plans to meet that goal by 2024. Back in 2017, NATO also declared its commitment to joining other international powers in combating ISIS around the world, which was another accomplishment in refocusing efforts of the otherwise dated goals. Not only was President Trump successful in modernizing the alliance, but most of the member countries have actually increased defense spending since he was elected to office.
If you look at it, the disproportionality of what the United States is doing is really too great, but we're working on that. Over $100 billion in new defense spending by the end of, actually I think this year, but it could be 220, but I think by 2020, I think we'll have at least another $100 billion spent by the allies, the other countries, the 27 countries outside of ourselves.
Greece, the United Kingdom, Estonia, Poland, Latvia, and Lithuania all reached the 2% threshold in 2018, and at least 16 of the member nations are projected to reach the 2% goal by 2024. According to NATO's annual report released in March of 2019, those 6 nations, in addition to the US, had met the spending goal, compared to only 3 nations who reached the goal back in 2014 under former President Obama's leadership. Meanwhile, at least 22 of the member nations have heightened defense spending since 2014, a symbolic move clearly connected to the president's push to hold other members accountable. During a meeting with Secretary General Stoltenberg and President Trump, Stoltenberg sought to emphasize the recent increases, saying both European allies and Canada had spiked spending by nearly 4% in real terms. And since 2016, the year President Trump won the election, NATO members have also allocated an extra $41 billion to defense. President Trump expects that number to spike to $100 billion by the end of 2020. Thanks for watching. Right Side Broadcasting runs on your donations and your support. If you're interested in donating, you can do that through the YouTube Super Chat at the bottom of your screen, PayPal, Patreon, or rsbnetwork.com/donate. To learn more about Promises Made and Promises Kept, check out www.promiseskept.com.